If your algorithm looks anything like mine, a few years ago this video by Miss Mina probably popped up on your home screen. And for me, this was my first time hearing about a capsule hotel. According to Condé Nast, they were first introduced in Osaka in the 1970s as a way for salarymen, white-collared workers who spent their days grinding in the office and their nights getting very drunk in the izakayas to sleep off their hangovers before buying a new shirt in the morning and heading right back off to work. It saved them a long drunken ride home and kept them from falling asleep on the street, which I'm heard is a more common problem than I would have imagined it would be. But since then, capsule hotels have become a staple for many people traveling across Japan. I've stayed in a lot of hostels over the years, but none of them looked quite like this. So during my recent trip to Japan, I booked myself into a capsule hotel. This is 9 Hours Studio Bashi, which is located in Chiyoda City, Tokyo. It's officially a 2-star hotel, but it got a 3.9-star rating on Google and it got an 8-star rating on Booking.com from 3,000 reviews. The price for one person for one night is around $25, but it can go up to $50 if you book at a time of high demand. You can even add breakfast for just an extra $5, which is pretty good if you ask me. It's about half or even a third of the price of a private room with an ensuite hotel in Tokyo. But if you're traveling in a couple or a throuple, dare I say, it might work out cheaper to just book a private room in a regular hotel if you book at a time of high demand. True to their izakaya-loving roots, this hotel allows you to check in from 2 p.m. on the day you booked to 5 a.m. the next morning, which means you can truly just go out on a mad one, come back absolutely mortaled, and just check in at 5 a.m. Checkout is at 10 a.m. Now, remember that time because it will be important later. The hotel has separate male and female dorms, which meant that me and my brother were placed on entirely different floors. The male dorms were on floors 3 and 4 with a washroom on 2, whilst the female dorms were on floors 7 and 8 with a washroom on 5. The only way you can access the female dorms is by a separate elevator on the 6th floor, which you need a female dorm QR code key to access, which made me feel pretty safe. Before heading to my pod, I headed to my locker to store my stuff. Each pod has a corresponding locker, which can only be opened with your QR code keycard. The locker was surprisingly spacious and well thought out. There was enough space at the bottom for a large rolling suitcase, and other bags could be put on the shelves above it. It even had a clothes rail and hangers if you wanted to hang a jacket. I was a bit confused at this point because I was told that they provided you with all your toiletries, including towels, pajamas, and slippers, which you were supposed to change into before going up to your dorm rooms to stop, trekking mud and whatnot through the dorms. However, my bag of toiletries was not in my locker. Fortunately, however, I did have my own slippers. So I put those on, grabbed all my stuff, and headed on up to my pod. Almost all of the pods were empty and the space was pretty much silent, which I'm assuming was because it was still the daytime. The pods are very clearly numbered, so I found mine with no problems, and I discovered the aforepromised bag of toiletries, along with some clean bedding, which, I would hope so. I was immediately impressed with how big the pod felt. I expected it to be quite cramped, but it is actually quite spacious. I found the size of the pods on the website. I mean, these are pretty good measurements, but in terms of privacy, like most hostels, you're not really getting it. The blind was essentially just a single sheet of paper that you hooked over the entryway, and it actually had a little gap, so that from certain angles, for example, I was on a top bunk, and so when I looked down at the pods beneath me on the opposite side, I could actually see the inner walls of their pods.
Welcome to my pod. It is very hot in here. I do feel really stuffy. I do feel like the pod itself is quite spacious, which is nice. I don't think it doesn't feel claustrophobic at all. The mattress feels reasonably comfortable. It is quite thin, so if you're someone who has quite a delicate back, maybe not for you, babe. I mean, I'm at the right board age at 25, and I'll be honest, I'm concerned about my back on this. I have the back of an 80-year-old woman, that's the truth. But for one night or a couple of nights, I don't think it would cause any problems. Gonna do a pillow test. You know what? It's a decent pillow. It feels like it has little balls in it. It does have little balls in it. It's like one of those squishy things. It's like a beanbag, basically. I'm sure that probably has something to do with hygiene, because maybe feathers are not the most hygienic, and so they've got the beanbag balls instead, which is a choice, but otherwise it's pretty good. I am going to put my own pillowcase on top of this. I'm sure they wash them. But just in case, I'll show you the view from lying down. Hiding my toes because there's no free show. The ceiling is just one big light. Speakers on either side, which I'm not really sure what these are for. The light above my head right now is on max, but you can dim it to whatever you'd like using this little nozzle. USB light nozzle, and then some other little switches. Okay guys, well this is my bed for the evening.
In this hotel, there's actually a common room on the 6th floor, which is like a nice little lounge area with tables for working and sitting, which is great if you're in a mixed gender group. But to be honest, I was quite comfy in my little pod, so I just hung out there for a bit before dinner and did my Skillshare classes. Did I mention that this part of today's video is sponsored by Skillshare? People are rejoicing in the comments, I know. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives, with thousands of classes led by industry pros across film, illustration, design, freelance, productivity, and a lot more. I recently started posting videos again after a short break, but something that I've always found really difficult is managing my time. My brain is, unfortunately, it's a sieve. It's very sieve-shaped. Information tends to fall through it. Every time I thought about trying to come up with a good workflow and a plan, I just got really overwhelmed and I procrastinated and cried. So I did what many have done in a moment of crisis. I logged onto Skillshare and took an Ali Abdaal productivity class. The class of his that I'm taking is called Notion Masterclass, Maximize Your Productivity and Organization. And I genuinely cannot express how much it's helped. I've been using Notion on and off for a few years now, and I'll be honest, it looked like the meme of the guy with the board and the hair, you know the one I mean? And so I figured there must be a way to do it better. And it turns out there was. Thanks to this class, I've actually started to build a workflow and structure within my Notion that allows me to clearly see what I need to do and how to do it. I can manage and organize all my different projects and content without feeling overwhelmed, which has opened a whole new door for me. I mean, who'd have known there was a way to get your work done without crying? I know a lot of you are probably on your summer break right now, so why not learn something that you've always wanted to? You know what the old saying says? Feel the sun in your face and Skillshare on your brain. The first 500 people to click my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Get started, babe. Thank you so much to Skillshare for sponsoring this part of today's video, and thank you to you for checking them out, because when you support my sponsors, you're helping to support my channel, and I really appreciate it. Thank you. And I wish you all the best with Ali Abdaal. After catching up with Ali Abdaal, I got ready to head to dinner with my brother, at which point he informed me that there was actually a camera on the ceiling of his pod staring at him. Now, naturally, concerning to say the least, so I did what I always do in a moment of crisis. And I asked Ali Abdaal. No, I actually googled it, and it turns out that 9 Hours Studio Bashi actually offer a sleep analysis report. It's an extra few dollars on top of your booking, but for that money, they essentially film you whilst you sleep, and it tracks the amount of times you wake up. It monitors how deep your sleep was based on your temperature and your eye movements. I don't really know, but the footage is then sent directly to the email you used at your booking, and no one else ever sees it. To be honest, I wouldn't even want to see that. So I checked at the desk that I didn't accidentally book this for my brother, and it turns out I didn't. He just happened to get a pod allocated that had this camera in. It wasn't turned on, but if he was worried about it, he could literally just unplug it for his peace of mind. Anyway, we went out for dinner, and unfortunately, I didn't realize that most sit-down restaurants in Japan closed at 9, so we ended up going to 7-Eleven. Which, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not even mad about. 7-Eleven in Japan is built different. I ate at a table in the common lounge area of the hotel, which was actually really pleasant. Most people kept to themselves, were listening to music or doing work or eating like I was, and we just were really mindful of each other's space. Satisfied with my chocolate bears, I headed to the locker room to get washed up and ready for bed. The wash facilities were really nice and incredibly clean for what is essentially a hostel. I was so surprised because I've stayed at hostels before where there weren't even toilet seats on the toilets. I kid you not. I changed into the PJs they provided, which were surprisingly comfortable. The pajamas were one size fits all, which made me a little bit concerned because I'm 175 centimeters, so I'm 5'9", but they actually fitted surprisingly well, and they have an adjustable waistband. The only thing I will say is that I could only find 2 toilets in the entirety of this washroom, which, when you consider how many pods there are, it seems like a logistical nightmare, an accident waiting to happen, if you will. So I'm going to assume that there are, in fact, more toilets, and I just couldn't find them. Because surely, right? Surely. All dressed, I headed up to the 8th floor to my little pod, in which to rest my weary little head. It was essentially silent in the pod by the time I got there, so I tried to be as quiet as possible, but honestly, you do hear everything. Despite how you may try, you do hear everything in these pods, and I mean everything. Someone moved their bedsheets. Heard it. Someone farted. Heard it. A group of American girls talking and laughing as they drunkenly made their way to their pods at 2 in the morning. You guessed it. Heard that too.
Someone has started snoring really loudly, and I'm just surprised it's not me. So this is why the noise cancelling headphones are very important. So I'm just going to turn that on now. Oh no. I already had the noise cancelling on.
I was woken up the next morning multiple times because someone, and I cannot express the extent to which I wish I knew who, decided to set an incredibly loud alarm at 5 in the morning, which they then proceeded to snooze every 10 minutes for 40 minutes. At some point, I just mentally turned off, just disengaged from my present reality, and I managed to sleep until 8, which is when most people got up. I'll be honest, I woke up feeling like I had been struck by a truck. When I opened my pod, I realized something pretty odd. All of the foreigners that I had seen had taken their outdoor shoes to the pods, despite being in pajamas, so I knew they had the slippers. Now at this point I wanted to recap my thoughts on the night whilst they were still fresh in my mind, but I wanted to be respectful just in case there were still people sleeping, so I came up with the genius idea of filming myself mouthing words, and just assuming that editing me would be able to understand them and add subtitles. Now, not to point fingers, but there were a good handful of tourists who were just not respectful about the shared space at all. I don't think that this is an issue with foreigners in general. Being a foreigner, I think I did a reasonably good job of meeting the expectations of quiet and cleanliness, but I think this is more telling of hostel culture rather than tourism culture in Japan in general. You do often find that some of the people that use hostels don't really respect that it's a shared space. It doesn't just happen in Japan or in this capsule hotel specifically, but I do think it was perhaps more obvious here when people weren't meeting the expectations because everyone else was trying really hard to.
Something else I will say is that if you are a light sleeper, this is definitely not for you, babe. I'm not gonna lie, that mattress is very, very hard.
I headed down to shower because checkout was at 11.
Good morning. On a bra, just ignore that. Just ignore it.
The showers were incredibly clean, considering that I was one of the last people to go and have a shower. The body wash, shampoo, and conditioner that they provided were very nice. I enjoyed them. I changed and got my stuff together to do my little skincare routine before texting my brother to be ready for checkout in 50 minutes. Now, those of you whose memory is not a sieve will recall from the start of the video when I said that the checkout time was not in fact 11, but 10. So my brother texted me this. I'm just an idiot, but at this point I'm panicking. So I hurried to grab all of my things from the locker and ran downstairs with half my belongings still out of my suitcase. Checked out 20 minutes late. Incredible. Excellent work, truly. Now I'm going to review this as a hostel, not as a hotel, because your expectations are different when you're staying in a hostel versus a hotel. And I think that if you're only used to staying in hotels, you probably wouldn't enjoy this experience quite as much as I did. I've stayed in quite a few hostels across Europe that were more expensive than this, but didn't match anywhere close to the quality. So for that reason, as a one-night hostel experience, I'm gonna give this 7 out of 10. It was cheap, incredibly clean, and efficient. It had free Wi-Fi and offered all the amenities I could need. But I also really loved how secured the female-only dorms were. Downsides. The mattress was incredibly hard. I am very old. It was sore, and I knocked off a couple of points for it not being disability friendly. Whilst the dorms themselves were wide enough to allow wheelchair access and you could use the lower pods, the space between the lockers was quite tight and there was no disabled toilet or shower facility. Like with most hostels, I would recommend bringing your own eye mask and earplugs, but for the price,
Give it a go. If you're going to stay in a hostel, why not stay in a capsule hotel? A little bit of an experience for you, babe.
On a separate note, I'm back to posting videos now, so if you enjoyed this and you fancy seeing more of my face, please consider subscribing. You don't actually have to do it, just really consider it. I'll see you next week, hopefully. It depends on if you subscribe.